Hello folks, Tim Osk here from Stonebait Games. Thought I'd show you a little technique I developed recently for a new prototype game I'm putting together. It's an in-game screen capture camera, so I thought this might be useful for doing things like screen grabs and in-game video for putting together trailers and things like that. What I thought would be useful would be to have the camera independent from the usual in-game camera, such as this chase camera that I've got hooked up at the moment. So let me just demonstrate this for you. If I hit the F key, the camera becomes detached from where it was chasing the bird here before, and I can move it around freely, just like I would be able to in the Unity editor itself. And I can frame up a nice screenshot or whatever. Take a screen, freeze the scene by left-clicking, take a screen grab, unfreeze it again, move the camera around, do whatever I like, and also. Obviously here it's paused the game, but if I hit the P key, you can see it unpauses the game, and you can see the bird flying off under its own steam. I can hit pause again, move the camera around, etc., etc. So that's the basic idea, and I'll show you how I put that together. Okay, so here we are in the Unity editor. So I'll show you the rig that I've set up. I've got a camera rig which I've grabbed from the standard assets, this multi-purpose camera rig, and I've just attached it together with my bird character into a bird camera root object that I can move around without having to move them independently of each other. So this is a pretty simple setup, but the thing I've added to the main camera is this thing called a camera flying control script, and this is a pretty straightforward script. It just enables me to control the camera in exactly the same way, or more or less the same way as you can control the in-editor camera. So I've just got various fields there for controlling things like the sensitivity and the speed and how quickly the camera accelerates when you're holding down the keys and things like that. Trying to make it feel a little bit like the in-editor camera. All this does is take the various control inputs, so WAS, ASD, elevation I've mapped to Q and E in exactly the same way as the Unity editor, and it moves the camera around based on what you input into the controls. The other important thing is to control the transitions between the in-game camera and the free camera, and I've just done that in the game controller. So I've got my game controller script, which manages various other things, but also the transitions between the two camera systems. So all I do there is I grab a reference to the camera itself, and also manage the states of what state I'm in. So whether I've got the free camera enabled, whether or not I'm paused, and what the timescale is at the time, and things like that. I also grab references to the camera flying control script, this free camera script that I've added to the camera. The auto cam is the script that controls the camera rig that comes in the standard assets. Also a couple more properties for just keeping track of where the last position and rotation of the camera was when I enter the free camera mode, and also the parent of the camera, just to make sure that I can reattach it or detach it as and when appropriate. So in the awake function, grab all that stuff, make sure that I enable or disable the relevant scripts to ensure that I'm in the game mode. So the auto cam script is enabled at the beginning, the camera flying control script is disabled right at the beginning. So when I press the F key, so in the update function, I call this toggle free camera, and all that does is manage the transition between the two. And when I am in free camera enabled mode, when I press P, that will pause or unpause the game as well. And sets the timescale appropriately. I've got a spelling mistake here, as you can see. Set to time cycle rather than to set timescale, but that's not too important. So the important method here is the toggle free camera method. So all this does is switch the states of the camera, sets the pause mode to the same as the camera enabled free camera enabled mode. So if I enter free camera enabled, it automatically pauses the game. just to make sure that the game doesn't keep running when I enter the free camera mode, and I can always unpause it if I want to later. If the camera is enabled, I null the parent so that the camera becomes effectively detached and is now in world space. I then record the position and rotation of the camera and zero out the Z rotation of the camera, because it's possible that when you're flying your bird around, the camera can tilt a bit, and when you detach the camera you really want that to be zeroed out so that it's nice and flat. So that just makes sure that that happens at the appropriate time. If you are in free camera mode and you switch back to normal in-game camera mode, all you do is you reapply the last known position and rotation of the in-game camera and reattach the camera to the camera rig parent object to make sure that everything works appropriately. Based on whether or not you're paused, the set time SACL method here will set the timescale to either 0 if you're paused, or whatever the original timescale was if you're unpaused. And that's pretty simple. Of course, you also have to make sure that you enable or disable the relevant scripts to make sure that you're not accidentally controlling the character at the same time as moving your screen capture camera around as well. Of course, the one thing that you have to be super careful about is how you manage the movement when your when your game is paused. So when your timescale is set to 0, time.delta time is always 0. So if you have a situation like this where you're trying to move a camera around in a paused state, it won't work. So what you have to do is you have to use this thing called unscaled delta time.unscaled delta time instead of time.delta time. This is independent of the timescale, so it will always be whatever the current frame rate is. So even if your timescale is 0, this will still get called with a decent, sensible value and enable you to move your camera around. The counterpart to that is, of course, the inputs that you use to actually to drive your camera. If you used getAxis, input.getAxis, that goes through the input manager's smoothing system, so which relies on the timescale, on time.delta time. So it will always be 0 if your timescale is 0. So what you have to do in these situations is use the getAxis raw value, or simply get key down or something like that is always an integer or 0, to make sure that your inputs, when they come into your movement functions, actually don't get set to 0, because if let's say if v was 0 here, it doesn't matter whether I'm using time.delta time or time.unscaled delta time, it will still be 0, so I won't move anywhere. So that's very important to remember. Always use unscaled delta time and getAxis raw when you're dealing with a pause camera. So that's all there is to it, really, and I'll just show you quickly again how it works in game. So hitting play, I can move my character around. Hit F to freeze the game, enter free camera mode, move the camera around, etc., etc. Press F again, resets the camera back behind the character as if nothing had happened. So that's all there is to it. I hope you found that interesting. I've certainly found it very useful. I think I'm going to use this in all of my future projects, and hopefully you can get some use out of it too. Thanks for watching.